Hey guys, what's up? In today's video, we're going to be discussing understanding the enemy, understanding the kingdom of darkness, the enemy that we wrestle with. For every Christian, it's really important to understand the enemy like you would understand your enemy on an actual battlefield. But I think it's especially important when we're discussing mental health, and this is what this page is all about. And if you're new here, what's up? My name is Christian, and I make content about mental health and social issues, all from a biblical perspective and a lot from my own experiences, so that we can all heal, grow, and make an impact on the world that Christ intended. So we're gonna go through 7 different ways the enemy attacks, the enemy moves, the enemy thinks in spiritual warfare, so that you're more aware of it and so that you can then be prepared. And the way we're actually going to go about doing this is by heading into the 2 Chronicles chapter 32. This is with King Hezekiah, and I really do love this chapter because I feel like it really does show the enemy really well, but with the physical, which is actually something a lot of the Old Testament does really well, showing spiritual things through physical means. The first thing that the enemy does is that he stalks with intent. In 2 Chronicles 32 verse 1, it says, "After these things and these acts of faithfulness, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came and invaded Judah and encamped against the fortified cities, thinking to win them for himself." So the enemy stalks and watches with intent. We can see here that King Sennacherib was encamped against Judah with the intent of winning the city, winning Judah for himself. And the same way, the devil will watch and stalk with the intent of trying to steal, kill, and destroy, as Jesus says is his main goal in John 10:10. Another reason the enemy will do this is to understand who you are personally, so he can attack who you are personally. This is actually something we're going to discuss a little later on in the video. And something I just realized is that I'm actually wearing an Armor of God shirt right now. That was not planned. The second thing that the enemy will do, and as we see Sennacherib did in this chapter, is that he'll sow seeds of doubt. And a lot of the ways he'll go about doing that is by reminding us of our past, reminding us of things that overwhelmed us, reminding us of our failures. In verse 13, it says, "Do you not know what I and my fathers have done to all the peoples of other lands? Were the gods of the nations of those lands at all able to deliver their hands out of my hand? Who among all the gods of those nations that my fathers devoted to destruction was able to deliver his people from my hand, that your God should be able to deliver you from my hand?" So as we can see here, something that Sennacherib is doing is pointing to past failures, and not just past failures of Judah, but of other people as well. And I don't know about you, but this is something I've experienced a lot. When you're trying to attempt to do something, when you have a goal or a dream, God has put something on your heart to do, and then you're excited about it, and all of a sudden you have these thoughts of like, well, this person failed and did it. I don't know, this has never been done before, or I don't really know anyone who's been doing this, or I'm the only one in my family or my friend group who's doing this. Is this really normal? Should I be doing this? Is this even from God? Then all of a sudden you're moving away from what God has told you to do. You're moving away from where God is calling you to, and entertaining the doubtful thoughts from the enemy. And this is why it's really important that as believers, we're constantly having our eyes on Christ. That it is written in Isaiah that when we keep our eyes on the Lord, then we will be made in perfect peace. And the third thing actually that's found in these verses is that the enemy attacked the identity of God with the purpose that Judah would trust him less. Something I talk about a lot is that how one of the main ways that the enemy will attack us is with identity, with attacking our identity or attacking God's identity. And when the enemy tries to attack God's identity, is with the purpose of that we trust him less, that we see him as less capable, less competent, or even less loving or less in control. Because we put our trust in things and people that are trustworthy, right? So if the enemy convinces us that God is not trustworthy, that we're not going to put our trust in him. If you think about a person you know that's always losing things, you're not going to give your most prized possession to them because you know they're probably going to lose that too. So likewise, the enemies will try to sow seeds of doubt, sow seeds of failure, sow seeds of confusion, so that we trust God less with the most important things in our lives. And one of the main ways he did this is comparing God to false gods. And honestly, he still does the same thing. It may not be the same kind of gods, and let's discuss in this chapter, but it may be money. If you think about it, we'll feel more comfortable with a lot of money in our bank account rather than trusting God and believing in his provision. It can be status. Sometimes we feel more comfortable with that extra degree, with that extra education. I know that's something with me personally that I struggle with. And getting that before God putting us in a room that we're not necessarily qualified by the world standards to be in. What I'm trying to get at, that these are all things that are very much applicable to our lives today. The enemy still attacks the same way today. Number 4, the enemy will try to make righteousness seem like foolishness. And this is something that we see since Genesis. And verses 10 through 12 reads, "Thus says Sennacherib, king of Assyria, on what are you trusting that you endure the siege in Jerusalem? Is not Hezekiah misleading you, that he may give you over to die by famine and by thirst, when he tells you, the Lord our God will deliver us from the hand of the king of Assyria? Has not this same Hezekiah taken away his high places and his altars, and commanded Judah and Jerusalem, before one altar you shall worship, and on it you shall burn your sacrifices?" So these couple of verses I really do love a lot, because I feel like it really does encapsulate the life of a Christian, walking as a Christian. Sometimes it feels like it's foolishness being righteous. It seems like it feels like you're a fool doing the things that God has called you to do. You'll get criticism from other people saying, "I don't think that's a good idea," or you get people saying like, "Oh, why are you trusting in God? Like, I don't think this is," maybe trying to gently convince you that God is not trustworthy, trying to gently convince you that you should put your trust in other things, and what you're doing is kind of leaning towards folly. And we see one of the main ways that Sennacherib actually makes it out to seem like folly is by presenting the threat of if God does not pull through. And how many of us experience the same thing? We'll have this thing that's due. We need God to show up at a certain time, and it's getting closer and closer, and we're in fear. And then there's voices in our head saying like, what if God doesn't show up? What if this is this is kind of stupid? I'm just trusting God. I'm not doing anything right now. I'm doing this thing this doesn't seem like it's working. And there are people people on the outside in our ears saying, maybe you should be doing this. I don't think that's a good idea. Maybe that wasn't the voice of God, or things like that. And it's like a lot, right? So in this, we have to really, again, put our eyes on the Lord, focus on what God has told us to do. And if really you're going to take it a step further, He will attack people around us to make their words seem like folly as well. Their words of life seem like folly, because King Hezekiah was their leader. So he's calling to the people of Judah. My Bible fell. He's calling to the people of Judah saying, why are you trusting in him? He's going to make you die from thirst and by famine. Surrender. What you're doing doesn't make any sense. I'll help you. And do you see how similar that is to the voice of the enemy, making his evil seem like some kind of care, and in the process making righteousness seem like foolishness? So my Bible fell, and it went to like the Psalms, and I was able to flip back to where I was in like 5 seconds. I used to marvel at that when I was in church. I'm growing up in Christ. The fourth thing that the enemy... Are we at number 4? We're at number 5. The fifth thing that the enemy will do that I find really interesting is that he will attack in multiple ways. And for that, we're going to head into verse 16, where it says, "And his servant said still more against the Lord God and against his servant Hezekiah. And he wrote letters to cast contempt on the Lord, the God of Israel, and to speak against him, saying, like the gods of the nations of the people who have not delivered their people from my hand, so the God of Hezekiah will not deliver his people from my hand." So something I really want to focus on is how it says that he wrote letters as well. It wasn't just the shouting, he also wrote letters. And I feel like this really mirrors how the enemy will attack us today, where sometimes we'll feel like it's like thing after thing after thing. The enemy comes at us from multiple angles. Maybe he'll come at our thoughts, and then maybe he'll come at our relationships, and then maybe he'll come at our finances. Understanding that the enemy doesn't just always attack on one end, that the enemy attacks on multiple. Make sure on frame. Gucci. Number 6 is that the enemy knew how to get his message understood, and he knew how to make it personal. The devil knows our weak points. He knows the areas in which we struggle with. He knows our strengths. This is one of the reasons that he stalks, so he can understand his enemy, that being us. And in verses 20 to 21, we see Sennacherib doing the same exact thing. I lied. It's not 20. It's still verses 20 to 21, but we're going back a chapter. 2 Chronicles 31, where it says, "Thus Hezekiah did throughout all Judah, and he did what was good and right and faithful before the Lord his God. And every work that he undertook in the service of the house of God, and in accordance with the law and the commandments, seeking his God, and he did with all his heart and he prospered. So just for a bit of context to help you understand, one of the major things that Hezekiah did was tearing down all of the high places of false gods for his father King Ahaz. And this is one of the things the king of Syria, Sennacherib, mentioned to Hezekiah. You tore down your high places. Look at the things that you've done. This is an area that Judah has just overcame as a nation. And this is a weak point for the people of Judah, because even prior to this, idolatry is something that the Jews have been struggling with really since Egypt. So really, from the perspective of the enemy, attacking Judah in this spot with idolatry is a pretty good idea, because that's something they just recently overcame, and it's a weakness for them as a nation. So the loud voice in the language to the people of Judah, that in the language of the people of Judah, he knew how to speak to the people of Judah. He knew how to get to them personally. He wasn't speaking in their own language. He wasn't speaking a language of another nation. He was speaking in a language in a way that they would understand. So likewise, the enemy does the same exact thing, where he'll speak to us in a way that we'll understand, in a way that we'll take it personally, and the way that we can hear it. And the enemy does the same exact thing to us. The enemy's not going to attack us where we're super strong at, or where we don't stumble at all. Why would he do that? He's going to attack us where we're weak. He's going to make the message personal. He's going to attack that doubt. He's going to, if you maybe have an insecurity with how you look, he's going to attack your looks. If you have an insecurity with your education, he's going to attack the lack of education that you have. Maybe you keep falling into a particular sin that no one else knows about, that's in the dark. He's going to attack that. He's going to come after that. He's going to plant thoughts about that thing, because that's where you're most likely to fall. And we see here that King Sennacherib did the same exact thing. And we can see in the verses we read a few minutes ago that King Sennacherib was tempting them to go back to their false gods, making the multiple high places seem better than the one place of sacrifice and worship that King Hezekiah established for Judah. Sennacherib, just like the enemy, is not doing this just to do it, not doing this just to see a sin. He understood, and I truly believe that he knew who God was. He knew the power of the Lord, their God. They did this so they will be in a position for defeat. And think about it. When are we at our strongest? When do we feel the best spiritually? When are we walking the best? When we're walking in alignment with God's word. We're walking in righteousness, not when we're entertaining the desires of the flesh. So the enemy will try to make us sin so that we are at our weakest, that we are more vulnerable. And then when we're focused on sin, we can't possibly be focused on God at the same time. And number 7, the last thing that the enemy did, and that he still does today, is that he used fear as his main weapon. And it's heading back to verse 18, where it says that they were trying to frighten and terrify them in order that they may take the city. I think that's a really important part to include there, to really pay attention to, that it's like this fear was necessary for them to be able to take the city. That without that fear being instilled into them, without that fear overtaking them, they wouldn't have be able to take the city. And they knew that. And this is why I say that I believe that the king of Assyria was aware of the power of God, was aware of what he has done before, and was aware that he really didn't have a chance of winning unless he was to get into their heads and make them not put their trust in him, because he understood that when they didn't put their trust in him, they failed. And the enemy knows that same exact thing today. So even though a physical battle didn't take place because God stepped in and delivered them, the people of Judah were fighting a battle before a blade was even lifted, because they were fighting a spiritual battle between them and the Assyrians. And this is the same thing that we experience today. Maybe before we go about doing something, accomplishing something in the physical, there's a spiritual battle that needs to take place. There's something spiritually that needs to happen, because the enemy will try to attack us in that way. And there are multiple types of fear that the enemy can use against us, and the enemy will use our personal fears for it. Some examples are maybe the fear of rejection, so we don't go for that opportunity because we're afraid of being rejected. We don't go for that person because we're afraid of being rejected. So we stay put. Maybe the lack of action because you're afraid of the fear of failure is something that I struggle with a lot personally. Maybe the fear of change, where we're so comfortable where we're at that we're not willing to go to where God is calling us to. Entertaining this fear leads us into sin because we're not going to where God is calling us to, or where God is calling us away from. So just a quick recap, because I understand that was a decent bit. The enemy stalked with a tent. He sowed seeds of doubt with reminders of the past and or failures. He attacked the identity of God so that they trust him less. He made righteousness seem foolish. His attack was in more than one way. He knew how to get his message understood and heard personally, and he used his most powerful weapon, fear. And now that we've understand how the enemy will attack us, how the enemy moves a little bit, Lord willing, my next video is going to be about how we can counter that, how we attack and go against each and every one of those things. So be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so that you're notified when that is released. And let me know down below in the comments, which one of these things do you believe that the enemy attacks you the most? I'm gonna have my answer down below pinned in a comment, so that I think it's just healthy for us to have, to speak about these things, so that because we are stronger together. And if you want more daily content from me, follow me down below in social media. I have all my stuff down below in the description, because I post a lot more on TikTok, Instagram, Shorts, but it's technically on here anyway, more than here. And above all that, you already know, remember, you got this because God's got you. Peace out.